Welcome everyone to the Washington State Lean Transformation Conference, and thank you, Brett and Evans, for having that appealing introduction with a little bit of music and a prompt question for people to get started thinking about. We'll go ahead and jump in as many more of you are coming online. We've already got over 500 attendees that are joining today. So my name is Ariana Wood. My pronouns are she and her, and I'll be your moderator today. And thank you to my team member and coworker, Kathy Holder, who's also supporting technology behind the scenes. We know a lot of you are familiar with Zoom meetings, but we'll start with a few housekeeping things about Zoom webinar. And so webinar is different. The biggest difference is probably for you that you can't see yourself and you can't turn on your video or turn on your sound at all. And with the number of attendees that we have today, that's just so that we can make sure that everyone can focus on the presentation of solving the people problem. So if you wiggle your mouse, you'll notice the Zoom toolbar will appear and you can see the icon for chat and Q&A. We won't be using chat at all for the attendees to communicate amongst each other, but we might use it to push out some materials to you. We will be using Q&A, and Brett and Evans won't be able to get all of the questions, but they'll get to as many as they're able to. So feel free to put questions in the Q&A for them. And you can also use the Q&A for technical questions if you have them. We'll do our best we can to support you. We will also have 5 polls during the session, and they're going to go pretty quickly. So as soon as you see one pop up, engage it and go ahead and select your choice and answer. And if you look also at the next slide, there's an option for closed captioning at the bottom. You can turn that on or off for yourself by clicking on the closed caption icon. And in the center of the screen, the vertical bar, you can move that back and forth to adjust your screen size and presentation size, presenter or presentation. The next slide shows a slightly different view, and if you happen to have that view, you can drag and drop the video around so you can have it cover different parts of the presentation. And lastly, we do have a survey at the end of the session. We'll plan to, it's just 3 questions, and we ask that you fill it out because it's really valuable for us to have real-time feedback. And then in the event that we have challenges with technology, it's been a little unpredictable, but mostly great. If any of the presenters gets cut off, or if we have problems here on our end with Results Washington, we'll try to get the session back up and running within 5 minutes. And if we're not able to within 5 minutes, we'll go ahead and record the session and post it onto our website at a later date. All of the materials, the video will be available on our website within a week, and the session materials themselves are actually already available on our website. So with the logistics out of the way, I'd love to introduce to you Brett Cooper and Evans Kerrigan. We're so excited to have them here today. Brett and Evans are the co-founders of Integris Performance Advisors and co-authors of their new book, Solving the People Problem, Essential Skills You Need to Lead and Succeed in Today's Workplace. This is a bestseller on Amazon in organizational learning and business communication skills. They've been supporting Washington State's Lean Journey since 2011, helping train several thousand agency employees on how to implement Lean efforts more successfully. And this has helped people across Washington government learn to work together in more productive, effective, and more human ways. Thank you so much, Brett and Evans, for being here today. Welcome.
Thanks, Ari. Hello, everybody. I'm Brett Cooper. Fantastic to be here. This is the 9th year of the Washington Lean Transformation Conference, and I'm so thrilled that COVID couldn't stop it. Special kudos to you, Ari, and the Results Washington team. You guys did a fantastic job of pulling this thing together. So, and as far as I can tell, there are more people coming to this one than there are when we're live in Tacoma. So that's fantastic. I wanted to point to the slide that you see on the screen now. We had this up when we were letting people funnel in. And this kind of tees up what we're talking about today, because as you see in the thought box there, it's really true that whether you're just starting your leadership journey or if you've been a leader for years, your future success will be determined largely by how well you work with people and how well you inspire them to work with you. So this entire session for the next hour is going to be about communication. And just in case you don't think communication and miscommunication impacts you, I have a quick little story to share with you. This is a little story that happened in 2019 to point out that miscommunication really does affect us all. So the story is that God said to the angel intern, "Did you finish arranging all the future events for the 2020s?" Angel intern says, "Yes, I did." "Wait, did you say 2020s plural? As in the whole decade? I thought you said 2020, the year." So yeah, it certainly feels like we've had a decade worth of trauma and drama this year, unquestionably. And if nothing else, miscommunication can happen anywhere between anybody. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today with solving the people problem. Again, it's all about the problem of miscommunication and people interacting with each other. So one of the things right out of the top I wanted to point out here is we know from Lean that the problem usually does not have to do with the people, right? The problem is always or mostly about the process, and people are stuck in a bad process. Well, in many ways, what we're talking about here with solving the people problem is it's the process of people communication. And very frequently, we all get stuck in that. So I want to go back to the question that was at the top of how many issues you face in your agency are made more challenging by the personalities of different people you deal with. Now, we have a poll here that I'm going to launch in just a second. And as already mentioned, we're going to have 5 polls total during this session, and we're going to keep them quick. This isn't going to be like a team session where we're going to sit and wait for 30 seconds and let everybody kind of, answer so we get everybody's feelings. This is going to be kind of a quick poll. If you are in a position where you can be engaged and want to be engaged, please chime in with the polls. And if not, that's fine. We won't keep you on hold too long as we do this. So here we go. First poll is how many of the issues you face in your agency are made more challenging by the personalities of different people you deal with. I love watching these polls, by the way, when we have 1,000 people on, because they just fly up the handle. So what we're seeing right now is that about 50% of you have indicated almost all or the majority of issues that you face in your agency are made more challenging, with another full third saying a good number. So less than 20% are saying some, and only 2% said barely. So that really sets us up live to have this conversation, because you all just proved that, in fact, this communication problem is an issue in your environments as well. So if we proceed to how today is going to function, we actually have a story for you, a story of one of the organizations that we worked with. A woman named Sierra is the leader, and she has a team. And so I'm going to invite Evans to come on in right now and tell us a little bit about Sierra and her team.
Sure. Thank you, Brett. So Sierra is a young leader. She's really been a superstar in her organization. She's been wonderful to work with. She's gotten a great deal done early in her career, so much so, hard charger, making things happen, that her organization said, you know what, we actually need to move you up into management, which is one of the things that a lot of really good performers have happen to them. She got a lot of work done with a lot of people, is well thought of, great results. She is now taking over a team that does some similar work to the work that she did herself on her past team. I want to introduce you to the members of her team as well. It's a small group, but a high performance group that's really knocked the ball out of the park for several years. Sierra's really excited because she knows she's getting some great people, and she's excited about what the future can hold for her. So the first person on her team I want to introduce you to is Bill. Bill's been with the team for several years. He is outgoing, gregarious. Bill seems to know everybody in the organization, and a lot of people outside the organization. Bill's one of those people who when you see him, he is ready to share a story. He is ready to talk to people. And he always seems to know who to talk to bring somebody else into a discussion to help us move forward. He delivers great results himself. He's always up with new ideas, great things to do. He's been a real bright light for this team for actually several years. Okay, so Bill's one of the members of Sierra's team. Okay, the next member of Sierra's team that I want to introduce you to is Mary. And Mary is a member of this team as well. Okay, and Mary has been with the team for just a few years now. Mary is really well thought of. Mary is the peacekeeper among this group. So when things start to get tense, Mary seems to be the one who can kind of feel the tension, can help people be comfortable. And she's been a great resource when things have gone off the rails in the past. Mary's the one who helps put everybody back together if there are challenges that we run into. Okay, she's caring. She knows about the people on her team. She also delivers good results. She's been able to get a lot of things done. She's not one to call a lot of attention to herself. Bill, if you catch him at the right point, will share a little bit of what he's done. Mary is much more likely to share what the team has done. She sees herself as being supportive, as lifting up everybody else on the team, making great things happen, but also through people, very similar to Bill. Third member of this team is Robert. And Robert's not quite as outgoing, not quite as loud as Bill. As a matter of fact, not even close, right? Robert is much happier, kind of nose to the grindstone, getting the work done. Robert is great at the details. He's the one who's going to point out if there's something missing in a plan, okay? Robert spends a lot of his time making sure that we don't make errors, okay? Robert's really strong. His results are spot on, technically perfect, kind of each and every time out. He's not as outgoing as some of the other members of the team. He tends to really like to make sure that things are done correctly. Not always at the fastest pace, but correctly. He's going to make sure those results are delivered each and every time. Okay. So Sierra's coming into this group. She's got 3 really good people who've all gotten great results over time, but she's got some ideas of her own about where this team can go and what this team can actually accomplish. So I've shared a little bit about Sierra. Sierra is one of the superstars in this organization. This organization kind of identified her pretty early that she could really deliver great results. So they've rewarded her with this team. She's put together kind of a plan of where they can go with this. She's really excited about this, and she gathers the team together to start sharing her vision of what that future can be. She's wired. She has no problem. She has no needs for anybody out from the outside to talk with her because she's got life by the horn. She knows what's going on. So she sits down and she starts sharing with the team where we're going to go. And all of a sudden, she starts to get a little bit of pushback from the team. They don't all seem to be as engaged and excited about her plan as she kind of hoped they would be. And I think she's a little taken aback by this, actually. And the other thing that actually kind of surprises her is, though there's some resistance, it's showing up in really different ways from the different members of her team. Okay, she notices right away that that Bill is excited about where we could go in the future, but his plan about what's going on in the future is not her plan. So he's excited about what we're going to be able to do, but he keeps bringing in different ideas and a different direction to take the team. Okay. Mary just kind of gets quiet, gets a little reserved, and Sierra's not sure if she's really even that engaged, but it does seem like she's getting a little bit of resistance, a little bit discomforted by the ideas about where we're going to go with this team. And Robert starts bringing up some objections pretty early about some things that he doesn't think will work, or that we need to do a little bit more research, or ideas that he says we've tried that in the past and it doesn't work. So Sierra is facing a lot of different pushback for issues that she actually thought people would be excited about, a future direction. She knows they're great performers themselves. She knows they can accomplish a great deal. She thought they'd all be excited, and that's not the reaction she's getting. And this is when Sierra decided she wanted to actually talk with somebody, and she actually reached out and she found us to start talking with us. I'm going to hand it back off to Brett so Sierra can tell you, Brett can tell you a little bit about when Sierra met us.
Yeah, thanks, Evans. So Sierra actually knew a little bit about our history. And like some of you on this call, you've had some experience with Integris over the last 9 years, because we've been working with Washington State for that long. And our roots, whether you know this or not, our roots really are in Lean and in Six Sigma. Evans and I worked together for 10 years before ever launching this company, Integris, all around Lean training, Six Sigma certification, coaching people on projects, coaching people through their process improvement efforts. And one of the things that kept coming up in those early years was we had clients that were saying, hey, we want lean thinking to be part of the DNA of our organization. And what happened more times than not was we helped them deliver these great project results, streamlined process, created some problem solvers on the project team, but we weren't able to get to that cultural shift that they were really looking for. And we really figured out by working with some of the clients that a big part of the problem was we weren't addressing the issues related to leadership and to teamwork. This issues that we're talking about today around communication, right? How do people interact? And so when we launched Integris in 2011, we knew that we needed to stay true to our lean roots, but we also wanted to bring more in around leadership and around team dynamics. In some ways, what we wanted to do is we wanted to build on kind of the classic lean and really focus on building work relationships that really work. And so as we were doing this, we looked at, okay, so how can we really structure this so that it makes the most sense for all the organizations we're working with, both the ones that are doing lean and folks that weren't necessarily doing lean officially, but still wanted to make sure that their processes were as effective and as efficient and accountable as possible. So there are actually 6 different applications that kind of fit into this idea of building work relationships that really work. We have decision making, we have general communication, we have conflict, we have teamwork, we have customer service and sales, and we have leadership. And so over the last 20 years, Evans and I have been working in this space and gathering all of our ideas. And we actually put it together in this book by the same name of this session called Solving the People Problem. And it was as we were putting all of this together and reaching out to people around what are their stories around relationships that work or don't work in the workplace, that we ended up meeting Sierra and we started working with her. So she, the work we do with her actually predates the publishing of the book, but her story is very much embedded within it. And one thing that I can say is that we are all different. And this is something, as you heard from Evans's introduction about the team, that in fact, Sierra and her teammates were all different. But there's something really special about this difference, and that is that difference creates great results when we understand, appreciate, and honor it, right? That is really what this is all about. There's some research that we included in the book that was about conflict in the workplace done a few years ago. And of all of the participants in that survey, they said that a full 62% of them blamed workplace conflict on the different personalities on their team and in their workplace. And so Sierra recognized this. Sierra knew that the different personalities on her team and their frustration with each other and their inability to work together really smoothly, that was a big thing that she wanted to overcome. So she was able to do a little bit of starting on her own. Even before she met us, she started looking at the topic of emotional intelligence, What you see on your screen right now are two of the early big name books about emotional intelligence. Daniel Goleman's Emotional Intelligence, which came out in '96, and then Emotional Intelligence 2.0 by Bradbury and Graves, that came out in 2008. And in both of these books, it highlights the importance of emotional intelligence. And Sierra had read these books, and she knew this was something that really was a factor on her team. In fact, a couple of the points that really stood out to Sierra in the first book, Emotional Intelligence by Goleman, she saw that in his studies, EQ was twice as important as technical skills and IQ for high job performance. And then in that book, Emotional Intelligence 2.0, Bradbury and Graves highlighted something very similar, that EQ was found to account for 58% of job success. And those were things that Sierra really wanted to capture. She said, you know what, that's what I'm looking for. So when she came to us, she had highlighted that, you know, I've read these books, I see what emotional intelligence is all about, but I'm a little unsure, what exactly do I do with it? Where do I get started? And how do I make a plan for this? Well, how many people on this call have seen or heard this phrase, which is what gets measured gets done, right? This is a key tenet of lean thinking. And so we brought this up with Sierra as she's thinking about her emotional intelligence journey. And we said, we agree, emotional intelligence is absolutely the foundation of what you need to work on with your team. And you need to measure it in order to be able to move things forward. And that's really what we've created as part of writing the book, Solving the People Problem. We put together a Solving the People Problem survey. And this is a survey that the team, Sierra and her team, was able to take. And it's a survey that all of you will be able to take as well. So stick around till the end, and we're going to tell you how you and your team can use this survey. But first, we're going to tell you, okay, how did Sierra use it? Now, I want to give you the background that the Solving the People Problem survey uses a updated framework for emotional intelligence. It's very similar to what was in the other books about emotional intelligence, but it takes it just a little bit further and makes it a little bit more practical. So the framework is a simple 2x2. The first column is all about awareness, and the second column is about application. Again, it's not enough to know about emotional intelligence. We really need to be pushing towards applying it, right? This is about practical. What do we actually do? So on the side, you'll see that we first start with self. And so when we think about self-awareness, it's really about knowing your style. Do you know the tendencies and the patterns of your own style? And if you do, then we go to application and make sure, are you choosing your actions wisely? Next, we go to the bottom row, which is the others row. And it follows a very similar pattern that you see on the self row. And that is, do you know other styles, the patterns, the tendencies, the preferences? And then do you use all of that knowledge to adapt your own behavior for the mutual benefit of everybody involved? So that survey gives everybody a score in these 4 elements and then provides some guidance on, okay, well, what do I do? Where do I go next? So with Sierra and her team, they started, first of all, with know your style. The team between Sierra, Mary, Robert, and Bill, they had some relatively low scores in this element of what we call DISC EQ. And so they wanted to dig in a little bit deeper to this. So Evans, once we had that survey in their hands, what did Sierra and her team do with it?
Well, I think one of the things that was really interesting for Sierra and her team was in the actual going through the survey themselves. They found some of the statements were things that they felt, yeah, I'm pretty comfortable. I always do that. And some of the statements were, you know what, I'm not as sure. I'm not as confident in that area. I've got to kind of take a look there. What they found was for all 4 of the elements, there were things they did well. There were things that they could improve. There were things that they would have to work on to kind of continue their emotional intelligence. One of the big things about emotional intelligence is, although we frequently use the term EQ, which sounds an awful lot like IQ, they're very different. And IQ is relatively set. Really early, we can move it a little bit, but not a whole lot. EQ is not that way at all. EQ is exceptionally malleable. We can change it. We can improve it. We can make it better. We can kind of PDCA that thing on an ongoing basis to get better and better and better at dealing with our own emotions as well as the emotions of others and handling those better and better, which is kind of the definition of emotional intelligence from psychology today. So what they found was it wasn't that they had or did not have emotional intelligence. They had a level of emotional intelligence, but they all saw opportunities for them to get a little bit better at that. And some of it was about gaining some self-awareness. And some of it was, to be perfectly honest, about getting some feedback from others on the team so they could better see how they were coming across. So it was a really interesting opportunity for them to kind of get into some discussions and see a little bit of what was going on. So one of the things that we did was we started some of those discussions about what they saw from one another. We shared the results with one another and talked a little bit about that, and then delved a little bit deeper into styles. Because one of the things that we find very helpful is using styles to give us a language for better understanding where we are and better understanding others as well. So we started to talk about style, and we actually engaged them in something we're going to have you guys do in just a couple of minutes here. And we asked them to understand their style. So Bill brought up kind of right away, oh, you know what? I took a styles quiz several years ago with a team I used to be on. And we had a bunch of letters. I can't remember what my letters are offhand, but we took a workshop. It was really interesting. It was really accurate, but I wasn't sure exactly what I could do with it. And we didn't use it after the workshop. And so we kind of continued the conversation with the whole team. And we mentioned the idea of using DISC as an instrument. And Mary popped up right away and said, actually, I took DISC a few years ago. And it was good. I learned a little bit about myself. But we took a workshop and then it was kind of done. We put it up on the shelf, put a report up on the shelf. We didn't touch it again. So, how is this going to be different? And the way that any of these instruments actually becomes different is because we actually utilize them. So what we offered to them is that we would take them through DISC, and we're going to take you through the world's simplest view of DISC this evening. And what we were looking for when we wanted to use style to move this forward, we had a couple of things that we were really trying to identify ourselves. We wanted something that was based on observable behavior. It's one of the real strengths of the DISC model. We wanted something that had history and research. In DISC's case, there's about 100 years of research that has continued to refine that model. The basic model is still there, but it's been refined. It's been really had a lot of science put to it. Something that gave us a simple way to start, but also gives the depth to continue that education over time. And also something that had a scientifically valid set of assessments so that we could help teams move forward. And that's actually kind of what we have used with them. So I want to take you guys through kind of the basics of what that actually lays out as, and then we can talk about what some of the details are a little bit down the road. So as they took a look at their surveys, we said, okay, so let's identify what style is so we can talk about this, put some language to this. And this actually comes out of some research that was done around EQ that found that people identified themselves as emotionally intelligent, but at the same time had difficulty identifying their emotions unless those emotions were strong. So we need to improve our language a little bit about how do we talk about emotions, how do we understand emotions, how do we identify them and choose our reactions around those emotions. So let's walk through the DISC model in a very, very simple way. So it's basically, it's two axes of observable behavior that we're going to take a look at. And the first of those axes is from fast-paced and outspoken to more cautious and reflective. Now, for all people, we all know there's people who start a sentence and they're off and going. And there are some of us who are going to hold back a little bit. We want to kind of think that thing through before we share it, a little more cautious and reflective, right? What was really fun, as soon as we brought this up with Sierra's team, they immediately kind of identified who was where on this axis, right? Sierra and Bill both kind of, obviously we're the ones who start the conversation, and we kind of get going with that. Mary and Robert tend to be a little bit more cautious and reflective. They like to think things through before they talk about it. Now, this is actually a difference that Brett and I actually share as well. Brett is much more fast-paced and outspoken than I am. I tend to be a little bit more cautious and reflective. I'm not at the bottom of that scale, but I'm a little bit south of the equator on this model. Okay.
Come on, Evans, let me launch the poll. Would you? Let me launch the poll.
Yeah, go ahead. Launch the poll.
No, we have a poll here that we're launching right now.
Okay. So identify for yourself where you would fit on this scale. Are you one of those people who is the first to go, or are you one of those people who holds back a little bit? Be a little bit more cautious, reflective, a little more careful about what I say potentially.
So as you're coming in, a technology question for Results Washington. I have some people asking about where is the poll. If it's not showing up on the screen, Results Washington team, is there anything you can do to help them with that? Or do we just unfortunately need to move on with that? We do have 3 more polls, so we can see if you can do anything with that. So I will say we're getting fantastic involvement with the poll. Right now, we just crossed the 75% mark. So I'm actually going to go ahead and end the poll there. Thank you very much for those of you who put it in there. And I'm going to show the results. So can you see the results on your screen there, Evans?
Yep. I've got the results right in front of me. So very interesting. So we have almost a third of the people here identified themselves as a little bit of where I am, a little bit south of the equator on that model, right? A little cautious and reflective, but not, I know that there are people who are quieter than me for sure. And then they're sprinkled kind of throughout. So we got 45%, a little bit more fast paced, and 55 or 54% showing a little bit on the other side. Okay. Now there's a little bit of everything, right? This is a continuum of human behavior, right? So we're sprinkled kind of all throughout, and it's not unusual that we would have a mix, but those mixes may be different in different teams. Okay. So the beauty, right? We said behaviors that we could identify. Okay. So let's take a look at our second scale that we're going to measure of human behavior here. And this is that some people are more questioning and skeptical. New ideas, new people, I'm going to challenge it right up front. And some of us might be more accepting and warm. We might be more willing to take somebody at face value until it's proven that we need to be a little bit more careful with that person. Okay. Same thing, this team was able to kind of identify, oh, yeah, actually, I kind of identify on this side or on this side of this axis, right? So all of us have worked with a lot of different people who seem to be gung-ho on whatever new idea comes down the pike or whatever new person is joining, and some who are a little bit more hesitant to kind of get on board or take those things at face value right up front. So Brett, if you could launch a second poll, let's go see what our population is here today.
Absolutely. And as you're funneling in with your answers here, I actually have a potential answer for those few of you that are not able to see the poll. Thanks to Megan, she made the comment that, in fact, if you are joining in Zoom via the browser version of it, it's possible that the polls are not showing up for you. That might be some reason why that is not showing up. But thankfully, it does appear that these polls are showing up for a majority of folks, because we have, again, over 70% that have voted on this one. And just before I close this, I'm going to mention that Jamie just said that he found the poll on the bottom toolbar. So I'm going to go ahead and end these polls. And here are the results for you, Evans.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So it's 50-50 split between questioning and skeptical, and
Wow.
we're accepting and warm.
Wow.
Wow. Okay, so obviously, this is beautiful. I mean, this is exactly what you would anticipate, right? If you've got an even scale that people are kind of walking across. And what we find is when we put those two scales together, we do find that about a quarter of the population is more questioning and skeptical, as well as more fast-paced. And about 25% of the people falls in any one of the quadrants you would get when you put this model together. So let me share just a couple of things as we talk through this model with Sierra's team, because this was kind of fun. So on that first scale, when we talked about people who were more fast-paced and outgoing, one of the stories that got shared, because we were talking about ourselves and people started to share a little bit, Mary actually brought up that brainstorming with this group was a really interesting experience, in that a lot of ideas came up really quickly, and almost all of the ideas were from Sierra and Bill. And Sierra got a little bit embarrassed, actually, and she realized, oh, you know what? Actually, I wasn't even aware of that. I wasn't even aware that actually almost everything was being dominated by just a few members of the group. Right? And this is a small group, but actually there's some research that backs that up, that says that for groups, when groups are in conversation, it's usually 2 or 3 people who are going to be the majority of the conversation, even when those groups are 10 or 12 people. Right? So our styles really come out in a lot of different ways. Right? So that was one of the things that came up. One of the other things that came up as we started talking about these different scales with them is that on the questioning to accepting side, Bill kind of offered up, after we kind of talked a little bit about this scale, that yeah, you know what, he was really accepting and warm. To use his words, he said there are really only two kinds of people in the world: friends and those I haven't met yet. And he said sometimes he gets burned with that, right? He's so accepting and warm that sometimes he should be asking a little bit more questions, both about people, but also about projects. Bill's an idea generation machine. And some of those ideas need to be challenged a little bit more than Bill thinks about before he kind of starts down a path.
Evans, I have one question that I think would be valuable to ask at this point. Joe asked, isn't it possible to be skeptical and warm? You want to address that issue?
Sure. So when we're talking about more accepting and warm, it is not friendly. It's that I'm going to take that new idea before I even question it, right? I can be exceptionally friendly anywhere on here, right? None of these limit who we are, right? This is just what's our kind of default, most comfortable setting. Okay. So there are very warm people. It comes out differently for all of us, right? So yeah, if you question ideas and potentially people up front, it doesn't mean you aren't super friendly. It just means you're a little bit more cautious about that entering into that arrangement up front.
Yeah, and I'll just quickly add, based on a couple of other questions, Evans, there's some people saying, sometimes I'm one way, sometimes another. It's absolutely a spectrum, and there absolutely is it depends at times on circumstances. But what we find is that generally speaking, there are preferences that are underlying people, and really, this is part of the reason why we use an online computer-based assessment to get to some of those nuances. This is just a snapshot.
Yeah. So if you could pop onto the next slide,
Yes, sir.
Brett. So here's the DISC model, right? We take those two axes and it puts us in a general quadrant. Now, there's a lot of variation in any one of these quadrants. If you think any one of these quadrants is basically a quarter of the population, right? So although Sierra, in this case, is more on that outgoing, getting things done, talking quickly, and a little bit more on that questioning and skeptical side, there's a lot of variation among people who are in that population. Another thing that's really important to know about this is this doesn't control you. This is a starting point, and all of us have a little bit of all four of those in us. So wherever your style is, it's not that you can't operate in a different way. It's just that your comfort zone is, this is where you're going to be most frequently. And all of the styles have strengths, as well as things that are a little bit more work for people who have that style to carry out. So Brett, if you go ahead and pop on our titles on that slide. Yeah, that's fine. Let's do the poll. So which of the primary styles fits you best? I'm kind of curious to see how this population actually rolls out.
So as those are funneling in here, Evans, here are the titles, if you want to kind of explain what those are.
Super. So the titles that go in here are that DISC language, right? It's an acronym for titles where the questioning, accepting, and fast-paced and outgoing is called the D, or dominance style. The fast-paced and outgoing, but more accepting and warm, is the I style, or influence. The cautious and the accepting and warm, as well as cautious and reserved, is the S style, for steadiness. And the cautious and reserved, as well as skeptical and questioning, is the C, or conscientiousness style. Okay. Now, again, all styles are good. All styles add benefit, and the styles don't limit us in any way. They're just what's going to be easiest for us. And if you go back to what Brett talked about the people problem, what we find is frequently those styles and the style differences we see create a little friction, a little bit of difficulty in how we communicate with one another, and they can really kind of make our conversation and our outcomes much more difficult for us to get to. Okay, so how'd the poll roll out, sir?
So there they are.
Super.
See them on screen.
So we're a little bit all over the map. Although we got a little bit over a third falling into the steadiness category, a little bit more cautious, a little bit more accepting. It's a great style. That is my style, actually. The style that I live in. There's a lot of great things about that style. We do tend to be folks who can help bring people together. We're very interested in collaborating, getting people to work together. It may be a style, and I'm almost curious how many of the S people would identify with this. Some of the folks in the steadiness style, when there's a conflict situation or tensions get high, that can be really difficult for us. That can make things kind of challenging for us. Okay. In general, so all the styles are good. All the styles have strengths. All the styles have things that if they overplay those strengths can become weaknesses. Okay. So those are the styles here. Sierra focused on results. She can be abrupt at times. As a matter of fact, that was one of the big things that came up with her and Mary. Mary actually thought that Sierra didn't like her, and Sierra had no idea why. But Sierra's ability to be a little bit rough, a little bit brusque, a little bit, okay, let's just get to it, Mary took as not actually being happy with what Mary was doing, right? Not what Sierra wanted to communicate, but it's the message that came across. And communication is not about what I say, it's about what the other person hears. So that was a little bit about identifying their base style. Now, in the case of Sierra, we took them into a more complex instrument, and actually an instrument that let them see both their own style at a great level of detail, but also other people's styles. But as Brett said earlier, right, this is not about just being aware. It's about doing something with that awareness. It's about making things happen out of that. So one of the things that Sierra's team did as they worked through this was they used a tool that we really like called the appreciation seat. So in the appreciation seat, if you'll flick to the next one there, Brett, in the appreciation seat, we actually kind of go through where each person sits in the appreciation seat, and we go through 2 rounds where everybody's going to share, here's the way you really help our team. And then we'll run around the second time with, we could be even better if something would change. So this is always a really interesting discussion for a team to have, because it helps us understand what are the things that we're doing that are really helping move the team forward, but also provides us that opportunity that all of us could do something to be better. And sometimes those 2 things are associated with one another. right? Sierra went first. People talked about her drive, her excitement, her getting things done. And then as we came back around, this is where Mary brought up the, sometimes I feel like you're pushing back so hard. I don't think you like what I'm doing. Not what Sierra wanted to communicate, but it's what was being communicated, right? We don't get to say, well, you shouldn't take it that way. We've got to figure out what do we do to make sure that we are communicating in a way that is getting across the value we see in the other people and what we need to have done, okay? Sierra, thank people for the feedback. We moved on. Mary got kudos for her dependability, for getting everything done along the way, and her calming role when things got kind of up in the air. But it was also brought up that she retreated if things got a little bit tense at times. And she pulled herself out of a conversation where people really needed her, right? So all of us have things that we do well as things that can be challenges for us. And that's what we really need to understand. It's not just about saying, well, this is my style, and so live with it. This is my style, but here's how I really want to come across. So here are some of the things that I need to think about before I just act, right? I want to grow. I want to be able to deal with these things better so that I'm dealing with them in a more positive manner. So all of them kind of took some actions out of this and things that they chose to do differently. Robert actually did share with Bill that Bill's idea of building rapport by dropping in and starting a conversation was not really helpful to him. And Bill owned it. Bill said, all right, so let's figure out how we make this work, because those connections are part of how I think work gets done, but I don't want to do them in a way that actually gets in the way of your being able to process your work. So how can we work through those things? And they did follow through and take these actions, right? This is not about a one-time thing. This is about creating those conversations where we can grow. So any questions about choose actions wisely, Brett, that have come in?
There was a comment about my style is a little bit different at work than it is at home, which we hear that a lot.
Yep.
And then there was some question about the data of distribution, but I think we can go ahead and move on with the model.
Super. So let's take a look actually at other styles, because this is where things got really interesting for this group. Part of it is about self-awareness, and I think in general, their overall styles, everybody was they were cool with that. They found that there was a lot more detail to it, a lot more they could pull apart. It was actually gaining an appreciation of other styles. And Brett talked about difference can be great strength, or it can be great friction. And it's not only about knowing who we are, it's about understanding who other people are and being able to appreciate the value that those different perspectives bring to the workplace. So as they started taking a look at knowing other styles, even this small team found there were all kinds of light bulbs going on about what had happened in the past or interactions they had had previously that had worked or had not worked, and what was really going on. Where Bill was all excited about an idea, and maybe he thought Robert was being negative about it, when it was actually Robert just wanted to make sure he had the time to understand it, to be able to make a good call on that idea. So they started to have more discussions around how those styles played out, and utilizing some of the tools they had to really understand those styles, started to see where those interactions worked and where they may not have worked quite as well as in the past. So this became an ongoing and really vibrant discussion that actually continues to this day. We started working with them, I'm going to say a little over a year ago. They are continuing to have discussions. We haven't worked with them for a while. But at the same time, they did not have a tool that actually is available to all of you guys now. And that's the tool that Brett actually mentioned already, which is this book that we put out. Because the book's got actually a bunch of examples through all 6 of those application areas. So when the book came out, actually Sierra got copies for the team, and the team has been using some of the stories there to learn a little bit more, get a little bit more in depth, as well as some exercises they saw in the book that they've applied themselves for their own team to kind of continue that discussion, continue moving forward. Okay. So let's take a look at the last piece of this framework, the last element here. And this is the element, this is the one that is kind of the ultimate piece here for me, is when we can actually adapt our actions so that we can get mutual benefit. When we're looking out for the best of all and using those differences in styles to accelerate our advantages, that's where the rubber meets the road, right? It's the application of my knowledge of myself, my knowledge of others, to make sure that we can be more and more successful in the future. So we started this idea using this with our continuous improvement teams, kind of walking them through. And what we found was really significantly different results. We had a better understanding of each other's styles, right? It's run those experiments, run those tests. We found actually this made improvement teams work better. So here's one of the things that I'd like to do. Let's do that last little poll. This is one of the questions out of the Solving the People Problem survey. Brett, if you'll launch that. So one of the statements we ask people is, I adjust my communication style based on the communication preferences of those I am interacting with. So Brett, we getting some ideas in there? Okay. Brett, I can't hear you. Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry. I am back. I was typing an answer, and now I'm back. And I was just saying, here's the poll. Take it away, Evan.
Super. So this group is doing actually better, right? This group is scoring higher in this than actually our survey results have of people who've taken the Solving the People Problem survey have to date. In general, people do pretty well on this, but not as high as this group does. We see a lot more sometimes in that population. Luckily, we don't see a whole lot of rarelies. It's my way or the highway, right? But having to adjust that is something that we got to be kind of conscious of doing, right? It takes us a little bit of work up front, but it can save us a lot of challenges on the back end. Okay. So this was an area that that Sierra's team did need to work on, and we were kind of getting ready to actually do this work with them when something happened in the background that made a minor change in some of what was happening with this team and evidently affected a few other people. Actually, this is when COVID hit, right? So it wasn't about us sitting down and talking about any of these things or them sitting down and talking about any of these things. It was about all of a sudden everybody going home, right? And so, you know, kind of like with most of you guys, from one day we're in the office to the next day, hey, everybody's a work from home person and maybe we'll eventually see each other and let's get used to Zoom and all those kind of things. Here's what they found though. This team didn't miss a beat going home and still hasn't missed a beat since going home. And part of it, they credit the work they had already done on their own emotional intelligence. Adapting actions for mutual benefit, those discussions have continued. The exercises they are doing to learn more about each other and how to work with one another, those have continued as well. So this team has really been able to capitalize on the value of adapting their actions for mutual benefit by using that emotional intelligence on an ongoing basis. From home, they've actually utilized another tool that we made available to them. We actually developed this with them and other teams. It's called the Solving the People Problem Field Guide for Leaders. It's a set of 5 different exercises you can do to further your advancement across all 6 of those applications, right? The teamwork, the communication, the conflict, all 6 of the applications. Each of them has 5 exercises here that teams can do. And this team has continued to do those. I recently heard from Sierra. Sierra has been asked to talk with the rest of the supervisors in the organization to help them understand how to develop their own emotional intelligence. And to do so, Sierra's actually enlisted her team, and they've given a presentation now to help other teams raise their emotional intelligence. Okay. And Brett, I'll hand it off to you to kind of wrap this up and get us out of here.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, this actually, there were several people in the Q&A, Evans, that were asking, so I'd love to use some of these ideas in a meeting I have coming up. Can you give us some suggestions? And really the point I wanted to make here is that this really has been and is the evolution of emotional intelligence. And it really is what we want to see in all of our organizations. So for those of you who asked and those of you who didn't, really our premise here is that the solution isn't just EQ. It's really DISC EQ. It's that everything that has been learned about emotional intelligence over the last 20 years, but it adds in DISC as a language that allows us to make emotional intelligence more practical and allows us to better understand both ourselves and each other. And so the first thing that I will say for any of you who want to take this a step further, it's your turn to take that Solving the People Problem survey. All you have to do is go to solvingthepeopleproblem.com, and there will be an access code box. Just enter the access code WALEAN, and you will go right into the survey. What I would actually suggest is share this with everybody on your team and have everybody on your team, like Sierra's team did, go through it. And you don't necessarily have to share your results with each other, but what you can do is you can have the personalized report that you can use to your benefit. So this personalized report that you will get after taking the Solving the People Problem survey is, it will give you three things. First, it will give you a score, a low, medium, high score in each one of those four elements of knowing your style, choosing your actions wisely, knowing other styles, and adapting your behavior for mutual benefit. It will give you some specific actions that you can take, some very specific ideas based on where you scored. What can you do now to improve your emotional intelligence and increase it? And then at the end, it has some guidance for actually building your personal action plan. So that's something that you'll want to do. The one other thing that you might want to pay attention to when you go over to solvingthepeopleproblem.com, a couple of people asked, hey, is there a way that I can get some activities? And in fact, the field guide that Bill was looking at a few slides earlier, the Solving the People Problem field guide for leaders, that's also accessible at solvingthepeopleproblem.com. So I would suggest get yourself and your team over to solvingthepeopleproblem.com. And first and foremost, take this survey and see where you guys all net out. And then you'll have an opportunity to be able to talk about these things and put it to use. So that really brings us to the end here. We have just a couple of minutes to be able to continue to field questions. So if anybody has any other questions, please go ahead and put them in. So as that's happening, I will just address a couple on here that I see. One of the questions is, how do you know if your adjustment to your audience communication has been successful? Julie, that's a great question. And largely the way you find out that you're successful is if you start having better communication, if some of the outcomes turn out to be better, some of the interactions come out to be better. We actually have some stories that unfortunately we don't have enough time right now, but we have some very interesting stories about people who really did not know what their communication style or their communication techniques were doing to the other people. But I will tell you that if you take that survey and then talk through it with your team, you're going to learn some things, because team members will start to tell you, because you're talking about it, hey, when you do that, that's not very effective. So that's another way, Julie, that you can find out if you've been effective with that.
So just a couple of really quick ones and I'll get out of here. Joe is exactly correct. Joe Haynes asked a question saying you really only have control over yourself. That is very true. What we find in the majority of situations, when we do take positive steps, we actually invite the other person to listen a little bit more. This can be a challenge for introverted people who feel more stress potentially about pushing back a little bit. but if we don't push back, those issues stay. So it's not about changing for others. It's about flexing who we are a little bit, not changing who we are, but flexing and helping others understand how better to work with us as well. Okay. Super. The field guide is available, as Brett mentioned. The survey is available out there. We're keeping that out there because we're using that to understand, are people able to kind of move and improve this over time, right? So we're really trying to get as many resources out there to people as we possibly can.
All right. Thank you guys so much for being here. I know even just listening to, again, some of the points that that were awesome to reinforce, with just remembering that regardless of which style you are, there's always a, sort of a way that it can be effectively used in a way that sometimes overuse can work against someone. And so learning how to adapt and adjust those things is just so critical and important, especially in improvement work. So thank you so much for being here today. And we're going to wrap up. I know there were a lot of questions that we weren't able to get to, but really exciting that people are interested and want to learn more.